Welcome to Public Comment. I'm John Dunbar, former mayor of Yountville.
And I'm Alfredo Pedroza, former Napa County Supervisor.
I'm Linsey Gallagher, President and CEO of Visit Napa Valley.
Thank you for joining us as we talk about politics, people, and whatever else Linsey wants to talk about. And this valley is reliant on tourism, but that's a good thing.
$2.5 billion a year comes into this little
We
community.
have unique revenue streams that most communities don't have.
Beyond the $2 billion, it's the empowerment of people.
So, Linsey, please just start us off with a little background, and then we'll get to chatting.
Thanks for the opportunity. Nice to see you both. Let's see. I grew up in a small town in Vermont, another agricultural community, and found my way to California eventually. Went to the University of Vermont and studied business administration. And then I worked for GE Capital, General Electric's financial services business. A great training ground in spreadsheets and business and all sorts of things. From there, after I finished that training program, I went to work for the Today Show at NBC and was manager of finance for the Today Show, which was wholly owned by GE at the time. After that, I decided I wanted to get out of the finance and the back end of the business and into the marketing side. So I pursued an MBA and got my Master's of Business Administration at Northwestern University at the Kellogg School of Management and Marketing. I did a summer internship with SC Johnson Companies on the Ziploc brand. Had a lot of fun learning consumer packaged goods, like the bags that, I loved the consumer packaged goods and marketing. I didn't love that people threw the product away at the end of the process. So I went back for my second year of business school. Ended up meeting Stephanie Gallo from the E&J Gallo Winery, who's also an alumni of Kellogg. And she had a friend who was very interested in working for Gallo, and it wasn't on my radar. My friend said I should come to the presentation because there'd be free wine and free food. And so I tagged along, ended up meeting Stephanie. She encouraged me to come to an interview the next day. She's, of course, the granddaughter of Ernest Gallo. And the rest is history, as they say. I was invited to come out to California for an interview. It was the first time I'd been in California, and really enjoyed the agricultural component of marketing in the wine business, and thought I would learn a similar skill set as to what I'd get at Procter & Gamble or Kraft or something along those lines. And so I moved to California, single and 27, and went to work for Gallo. Had a really great experience learning marketing and wine from the best
They do
from
a
the
good
Gallo
job,
family.
Yeah,
And
we actually consume the product when you're at a place like Gallo.
Yeah.
very important. Yeah.
Hold on. Vermont, they have agriculture?
They have more cows than people. And they make maple syrup. It does not resemble Aunt Jemima or any of that.
Well, but I think, John, you mentioned the Today Show, and John perked up. Like, I think he wants to be a guest one day. So if you have any connections there, I think
Absolutely.
John would love to go into that business.
Too early in the morning.
I did Katie Couric's expense reports. So,
Talking about Excel sheets.
and Matt Lauer's contract, but that's another story.
But I will tell you, I think, Linsey, what you've done, I've had a chance to get to know you, and, I coach your son in soccer, and I got to know you and your family. So, beyond just the title, just to get to know you and your family and what you've done for Napa, just thank you, right? Because I think sometimes it gets lost in translation and everything that we have to do. But let's just start off with, like, you're at the helm of Visit Napa Valley. Like, you've been through a pandemic, right? You've been through a time when everyone wants to be Napa. And here we are trying to sustain what we have. So just give us a glance into what is it like to be Linsey Gallagher, the president of Visit Napa Valley. Like, you are responsible. I don't even know the numbers, but I know you do because I see, the number of piece of paper you have. Like, you have a responsibility that impacts so many lives of folks that live in Napa. So just tell us a little bit more about kind of what's your day like.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it is a privilege and a pleasure to get to do what I do, which is, boost the hospitality industry. That's 16,000 jobs in this community, $2.5 billion a year that those visitors spend here in Napa Valley. It's incredibly important. It enhances our quality of life as residents. Look, you both know my husband Lon and I very well. We moved here right after we had our first child because we wanted to raise a family here.
He's a great athlete, by the way. Yeah. I coached him in sports, so I can tell you that.
Lon or the child?
Logan.
No comment.
He doesn't listen well, but this is Logan.
Is it Lon? Okay. Yeah.
That being said, it's, this is a small community where we are all friends and neighbors. And I always say in Napa Valley, it's 2 degrees of separation. You don't even get to 3 or 4, let alone 6 degrees. And So I think that back to what I originally said, it's an incredible privilege to get to do the work that we do. I get to be outside of Napa Valley often and being an advocate and a champion for what the wine industry has worked for generations to create in terms of the quality of wine, and the hospitality product we have here is second to none in the world. And it's an honor, but it's also a big burden to try to boost and maintain that industry in challenging times.
I wanted to go back just a minute to some of your other parts of your career that got you really fully kind of integrated into the wine world. So you were at Gallo, and you also were with the Wine Institute right before
Yes.
Visit Napa Valley. So
You did your homework, John. You're good.
Well, we've known each other for a while anyway, but how did that really help prepare you for Visit Napa Valley? Because it is much more than agriculture and the wine business, and it's more than just Napa Valley. It's California, it's
Yes.
global. And so you really had to learn all the different aspects of destination travel, tourism, and all the related fields.
Absolutely right. And, at the California Wine Institute, that was the first trade association that I had worked in. And I was there for 10 years and just gained incredible insight into a global perspective on a California product there, and got to work with all the wine industries, the wine regions, throughout the state of California. So whether that was the crown jewel of the industry, Napa Valley, or Sonoma, or Temecula, or Paso Robles, or Lodi, or Monterey, all of those regions. So I got to work very closely in that role with Visit California on the destination marketing side, because when we were going into China to build the California wine market, first and foremost, we were talking about California as an iconic and aspirational destination. Then we could talk about a world-class wine producing region. And then we could talk about Napa Valley and, Raymond, which is what we're drinking right now. So,
Beautiful wine.
It is beautiful wine
In the
with
spirit of our good
a
friend.
great spokesperson, as well.
I also wanted to go back because we all experienced it in very unique ways with not only the pandemic, but we go back to the earthquake and also the years of wildfires and how it really changed the whole dynamic of destination travel, and how you come out of some of those disaster times. You don't, there's no playbook on how you do that. So maybe touch on how you managed to navigate those times. It was so challenging. We didn't really know how to manage through a pandemic or massive wildfires and what that meant to people coming here or not. So what were those kind of experiences like for you?
John, before Linsey answers that, I'll tell you, because we were on a call for the Great Wine Capitals, which we were part of. I think it was a call at 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. I may get my AM times blurred.
No, it's like 2 to 3 usually when we.
So we're on the call and we're talking about, the response and how we're trying to reopen our communities, but learn from each other. And I think I hope we get into this color, because I think people sometimes lose sight of the job, Linsey, of how hard it is, right? They see the $2 billion that you mentioned, and we should kind of take a deeper dive. And we don't internalize that, right? How we recover from the pandemic. People sometimes take that for granted, but I've been able to work with you in the trenches and see the behind the scenes. It's being on calls at 2 a.m., like not p.m., a.m., and ready to talk about Napa and how we're quarterbacking the response, and how you're not there to protect Visit Napa Valley. You're just trying to protect the revenue that that's generated into the community for the benefit of all residents. And to me, that's what makes your organization so valuable to our community, John. Like, we've been in it, right, from the government side, but to have partners, right? And this is we're not here just to promote Visit Napa Valley, but I think you have to acknowledge and give credit where credit is due, as we've done to the vintners and, the wine growers and the Farm Bureau. You're part of that partnership. So maybe you're kind of talking about what John said, I think it'd be great for you to, Linsey, to take a deeper dive into the behind the scenes of what it takes to build the success that you built.
Well, thank you. I think, we navigated the unimaginable in 2020, which I call our layers of crisis. Like, we had this pandemic, nothing the travel industry had ever seen before in modern history. And then in Napa Valley, we add 2 layers of wildfire on top of that. And so we're trying to figure out, and Alfredo, that's how I got to know you so well. And that, this community, I'd like to also pause and say, this community comes together like no other when we have a common crisis. we are going to figure this out. We are going to work together. We're going to have each other's back. It's, comes from being a farming community. If I'm done fermenting and you need a tank, I'm going to loan my neighbor my tank, even though we might compete on the world stage. And that, I think we have to not lose sight of that, especially in times like these that, both globally and nationally are so challenging. Napa Valley can come together like no other region, and we win as a result of that. So I think that, I want to give a shout out to this community for doing that so well. That being said, we were navigating, when can hotels open back up? What's going to be safe? What color tier are we? What does that mean? Can we serve wine outside? Because this winery doesn't have a permit to do that, but we're only allowed to be outside. Can this restaurant have only al fresco dining? Do people have to wear a mask on the patio? Are we purple? Are we yellow? How do we compare to neighboring regions? I mean, it was just, so crazy to navigate all that. And then we had these fire events on top of it, the worst that we've ever had in Napa Valley. And so there was a lot of challenge from that, of course, but I think, we were able to connect with consumers. We were able to deploy a phased approach of, when it's safe and you feel comfortable traveling, Napa Valley is going to be here ready to welcome you back. And we sort of phased that communication campaign forward. But again, it was the whole community being part of that story and really, coming together. In the beginning of the pandemic, we would have these Zoom calls with my board of directors. And then people would say, hey, I hear you're doing these calls on Wednesday mornings. Could I jump in? Could I jump in? So eventually, about 3 weeks later, we go on the Zoom call with our 15 board members, and it's maxed out with 100 people. And that was as high as my Zoom subscription went. So then I was like, what's the next level? I don't know. So we went up to 500 people. 3 weeks later, we maxed out at 500 people calling in just to understand what was happening at a state level with visitation, what was happening locally. And you and so many other partners, you and Yachtville, John, everybody came together on those calls and, reported out what we knew. And then we figured out together what the path forward was going to be. So we recovered ahead of any other region in the state of California. Some regions are still trying to recover to their pre-pandemic revenue. We got there in a year. And nobody else in the state of California, frankly, in the nation, other than destinations that didn't close at all, were able to succeed so quickly.
So on that point, though, Linsey, I think it'd be great to kind of just maybe pause and to say that we recovered ahead. We should celebrate that. But I think, to me, as you were saying, I didn't know that, that you met the max subscription. That's awesome. But it speaks about the engagement of your members and your owners. So how do we accomplish that level of success, right? Because it's not just throwing money at it. I think it takes intentionality to it, right? So what makes Napa different in the sense of how we reach this level of success?
I think we, in the most authentic way, exceed expectations across the board, whether that's in the quality of our wine or the amazing hospitality experiences that we have here. It exceeds expectation, but it does it in a very approachable and authentic way. It's not glitzy and glamorous. I think the beauty of and the magic of Napa Valley is that it's understated. When people get here, you're in jeans today, Alfredo, and you're wearing the winemaker vest, and that is as our
my uniform.
But I think people come to Napa Valley and they don't expect it. I think they expect white gloves and a tuxedo based on the reputation. And so really that
approachability,
the understated elegance of it all, I think is what people fall in love with. And I think that we always over deliver on expectations. Once people come here, they fall in love with the place. They're going to buy the wine when they go home, and they want to come again.
Well, it really is a destination that's not, granted, the foundation is our agriculture and our wine industry for sure, and hospitality in a broader sense. But I think, to your point, just to build on that, the natural beauty of the valley is almost an add-on, maybe even a surprise for people when they get here, with the hiking, biking, walking, hot air balloon rides, kind of anything you want. You can take a gondola ride down the Napa River, whatever. And so it is kind of a full experience that people can have whatever they want to do. If you want to just chill out and lay by the pool and have a nice glass of wine and then enjoy a wonderful dinner, you can do that too. And so what's also interesting about it, your point about us kind of rebounding, because we know the value, the importance of the jobs that are impacted, the financial implications of people not coming here. Um, it's just difficult when there is an expectation that, oh, it's just going to keep working, because for decades it
It's on
has.
autopilot.
But we have seen things that we have never experienced before. It used to be good vintage, less good vintage. Weather would be the biggest challenge we had. Now you're seeing so many other external pressures, whether alcohol is a risk factor or not.
I'm going to drink to that.
Yeah, I think we should. I'm willing to risk this.
Wine and health, I think.
Cheers, yes.
In moderation.
In moderation, yes.
But really about the combination of external pressures and then kind of the heavy regulation of the industry. Those are things that we are going to continue to have to balance and navigate. And so it's like when people say, "What do we do now?" How are you ready with an answer? I mean, it's really hard.
Absolutely. And I think it's ours to lose at this point, because every destination out there is, without naming names, those to the south and the west of here are, we're just like Napa, but we're more affordable, or it's easier to get a reservation, or the wine quality is just as good, but less expensive. And so I think there's, from a competitive standpoint, like I'm a marketing professional at heart. And when you're looking at your competitive analysis, everybody wants to knock us off of this spot. And so now more than ever, we need to work together on all the pieces that are the secret sauce of Napa Valley and show the world that we have the best quality wine and you have the best hospitality and tourism experience. And what does that mean for residents? That means $2.5 billion a year comes into this little community. It means we have 2 Targets, a Home Depot, a Whole Foods, a Trader Joe's, Thomas Keller restaurants, and the best food trucks, all in this little tiny place. And if we were a 130,000 population agricultural community somewhere else, we wouldn't have all that for our residents. And so it's not all about the visitors. It's about what the residents get in terms of a quality of life enhancement by being generous and putting a welcome mat out for visitors.
I want to jump in real quickly and build on what you just said, because I see a little bit of a different angle on top of what you just described, which is local folks have an opportunity to have their own business where if it was just local served, may not survive. But because we have a lot of the folks that come here to visit, then the retail shops, the salons, the whatever they might be, the bookstores, they can thrive too, because the volume of people here is so much greater than it would be if it was only residents. And I get frustrated, and I have for a very long time, when people talk about there's nothing here for locals or a local
Chef's
serving
Market
business.
just came back last week. I heard about it.
First Thursdays. Yep.
But local serving, I mean, it's impossible to find a business that's 100% local serving. If somebody once tried to argue, well, landscape businesses, well, yes, they need a local property maybe to landscape, but there's much more than that. So it's hard to manage local business without the visitors that we have here. And I think that that's a critical role that sometimes people are frustrated that there are the waits at a restaurant, or there's a little more traffic. But we've seen the alternative through the pandemic, through wildfire seasons, where streets are empty.
Well, the traffic's us, John. Like I can tell you, driving in the morning, it's not tourists. It's us going to school and running errands, right? But look, I hear your point, and I think there's a trickle down effect that sometimes doesn't get, categorized
or appreciated.
I think appreciate is a better term, right? But to me, Linsey, we've had a chance to travel and promote Napa Valley, right, on the global scale, and I think I'd love your perspective on what you said earlier, right? People look at Napa Valley and people are racing to be Napa Valley. And we've had a chance to go on stage and talk about what Napa is, but you do this day in and day out, right? And I don't want us to take that for granted, right? So when you talk about Sonoma or Solano, and I'm putting names out there, you're not, or Monterey, but they're trying to get ahead of us every single day. They're trying to get ahead of our, owners, whether they're individual or corporate, and that means impact to our residents potentially, right? So what is it like to try to stay ahead of the competition every day And it's not like you have endless resources, right? You are working with a defined set of resources, right? It's not an undefined fund. So tell us how hard that is, because I think sometimes it just gets lost. Like we see you and we see our hotel properties maybe be busy, we see our restaurants, but there's so much behind the scenes that it's required to build this and sustain this. You're not, let alone just build it. You're having to build and sustain. Like that's two fights on two fronts, right? So give us a little color on that, maybe.
And as you know, Alfredo, we participate in the Great Wine Capitals Network, and most of the other regions, particularly the European ones, well, pretty much all of the other ones, get a lot of government funding for the wine industry, for the tourism industry. I mean, they are trying hard.
The government
to support.
So to your point, the government is giving money to tourism organization in a multiplier effect.
Entirely.
You are essentially self-funded.
Self-funded, yes.
Right.
So we get visitor, and maybe we should just define that a little bit because we haven't yet. How does the money flow into the organization and into the brand building work that we do?
I think that's good for you. For us.
That is an assessment on overnight hotel guests. So when, let's say you're staying at the Archer, when you check out, there's a 2% assessment. It's not a tax. Visitor pays it, and that goes into a fund that allows us to market to visitors. So it's that revenue comes from the visitor, and it allows us to do the marketing campaign. There is no there is no funding coming in from regular taxes on general fund,
like property
from
taxes,
Sacramento, from the cities. No, quite the opposite. And then that the funding that comes in through that assessment also grows the transient occupancy tax that each city receives. And so that visitor pays 2% in the marketing assessment. And in most towns, they pay 13% in transient occupancy tax. So let's go with Yountville, since that was your most recent experience, Mayor Dunbar. Let's say that guest is staying at the Napa Valley Lodge. They're going to be paying 13% when they check out of Napa Valley Lodge into the general fund of the city of Yountville. So that's transient occupancy tax from that visitor. So those visitors come and they stay and they visit wineries and go to restaurants, and they leave behind these two important revenue streams that is paid by visitors. One allows us to do marketing. The other goes into the general fund of each of the cities throughout the valley. And in the case of Yountville, it's 65 or 70% of the general fund of that city, town of Yountville, coming from transient occupancy tax. So those are your overnight visitors that are, funding nearly 70% of what it takes to operate that town. The same thing in Calistoga, somewhere between, depending on the year, between 65 and 75% of Calistoga's general fund budget comes from guests staying in a hotel.
So I feel like we should pause. So like that's someone from the outside coming to Napa, staying at a hotel, spending money. Like that's what we're talking about, right? Versus us paying for it at the grocery store, or us paying for it at the pump for a gas tax, or us buying property and having our property tax be. This is an outside source. And I think I'm not trying to simplify it, but I think it's important. So if someone that's listening understands how valuable that chain is, right? Which allows you to go and promote Napa Valley at a time when everyone's trying to outcompete us.
So I want to make the connection for the average person that might be listening that's a resident.
Are you saying I'm average?
Not at all. You're exceptional.
Thank you, John. Like this wine, by the way.
Yes.
I actually really like this wine.
But it's how roads are getting paved.
Yes.
It's how parks are being maintained and existing. These are definitely local benefits that come from those visitor dollars. And yes, in Yountville, we were all in on the visitor experience.
You were dependent on it.
Yeah. TOT and sales tax were typically around 75% of our total budget. But that's also why we didn't have to raise water rates as quickly. We didn't have to do other things to generate revenue. Yes, we were reliant, and this valley is reliant on tourism, but that's a good thing because most communities don't have that option. And so it's much more of a struggle. We're seeing economic pressures today and these last years and years probably going forward where there are going to be real financial challenges for a lot of cities. When I was with the League of California Cities, we talked about there were probably a couple dozen cities that were on the track to bankruptcy, and they with a lot of their obligations for pensions and whatever else, because they couldn't generate enough revenue. So those are very real circumstances that we are somewhat immune from, not completely, but we have unique revenue streams that most communities don't have.
But I don't think we're immune from it, John, though, right? And I think I'd love to hear Linsey talk about how do you sustain this, right? Because you illustrated what all these other communities are facing, John, right? Employee wages and benefits are over 60% of cities and counties' budget, right? And then you hear about 70% of TOT supports the city of Calistoga, right? So there's not a dependency. We are intertwined together, our shared success. So how do you look at the future, Linsey, and talk about sustaining this, right? And what does that look like for Visit Napa Valley and your members?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, for this community, it's $108 million a year in tax revenue for resident and community services that comes from those visitors. And so that is something I think that the hospitality industry is incredibly proud of.
We should be.
And that is what keeps my team and I awake at night, is how do we keep that $108 million a year coming into the resident benefit fund for Calistoga, Yountville, St. Helena, the city of Napa, American
Resident
Canyon,
benefit, I
and the
like
county. That's incredibly important, and we have to maintain that. And yet, back to your earlier question, Alfredo, that 2% that is assessed on guests for marketing, it's $8 million that comes through to Visit Napa Valley. And while that's a big figure on a relative basis, that's not a lot for a global marketing campaign to try to reach the entire world and to inspire them to visit us in Napa Valley. And once they commit to Napa Valley, we want them to know about all 5 of the towns that are here. And we want them to stay longer.
Even Yountville?
And spend more money.
I'm kidding,
even
John.
the culinary heart of the valley. All the towns are important. All of our children are important. No, but I think that, when people understand that Napa Valley isn't one-dimensional and that the experience in Calistoga is very different than the city of Napa, as an example, they want to stay longer. They want to come again, and they spend more money.
And I want to have your back on this, because I've seen you promote from American Canyon to Calistoga equally. And I know sometimes there's criticism, but I've seen it, right? And I'm not a resident of American Canyon or Calistoga, but I've seen you go out there and talk about it, because I think it's the region is intertwined, right? To your point, the experience of American Canyon is fundamentally different than Calistoga, right? And I'll tell you, like, we were in Verona last year for the Great One Capitals, and we're meeting with, I think, the vice president of the municipality, and we mentioned we're from Napa. She said, I was in Napa. Like, she didn't say that about anyone else, but she single-handedly pointed out Napa, and that's the strength of our brand. So to your point, and I'm just fascinated by, like, you have to keep not feeding this, but you have to keep supporting it in a time when everyone's trying to be us.
Yes.
And I've heard Sonoma say, well, you're just Napa Auto Parts, because we can poke at them all day long, but we're not. But it takes so much intentional effort to support the quality of it. But the one thing I do want to ask you, because we haven't talked about, is the investment in the employees. I think what you all have done to have careers and to make sure you're treating people fairly. I've walked into properties and I see that investment from your owners, your members, of career development. And Linsey, I think sometimes that gets overshadowed. So can you just talk a little bit about what you are doing, right? Just to that investment back. We talked about the residents, but your owners, they're all in, right? They're not absentee owners, at least what I've seen.
No.
They're invested in this community. So, like, what are you doing? What's your industry doing to make sure that, just like the industry, like the Great Grower industry does, the Farm Market Foundation, I think you're doing an incredible job of trying to show that you're investing back into your employees as well.
Absolutely. And that, really came about in earnest as we started to recover, frankly, more quickly than many anticipated coming out of the pandemic. And everybody's workforce got thrashed during that process. My own, at the Visit Napa Valley Destination Marketing Office and all of our partners, it was a complete turnover of staff. And we had a lot of people that we needed to educate, people who were coming back into hospitality who had left, or people coming from other destinations wanting to be in Napa Valley to live and to work here. So we have a very intentional workforce development effort underway. Folks can check it out at crushthatcareer.com. And it's about really instilling a sense of pride in the career path you can have in the hospitality industry. It's not just a dishwasher job or a front desk job or what have you, but showing that you can have a very successful, rewarding career that keeps you here in the Napa Valley or sends you out to the world, and really just showing how many of us, myself included, my first job was, for the catering department and working in restaurants, and yet I've gone on to, have very, many more layers. We're trying to show those stories of a career path, and we're trying to sort of flip the binoculars.
Yeah.
We're good at telling the world why they should come to Napa Valley. We also want to inspire people to come work here in the hospitality industry.
To that point, what are you hearing and seeing in our near term, medium, and long term forecasting for our economic success? Because there are a lot of pressures out there. So, is there something that you can identify? I know it's a little bit volatile these days and unstable, but what is your kind of immediate vision for how things are going to work for us here in Napa Valley?
Absolutely. I am and will always be bullish on Napa Valley and us pulling ahead of the rest of the pack. And we are all, I was recently in San Diego with all the other destination marketing CEOs throughout the state of California with Visit California. And a lot of those regions are forecasting down. The state of California came down by $6 billion in their travel spend forecast recently. Because of the impact from international visitors not coming here. So here in Napa Valley, we have 3 buckets that our visitors come from: the tried and true leisure guests who come here for personal experiences. Then we have international, and then we've got group and business travel. So we were very robust in our forecast for international recovery coming into 2025. We have had to revise that down. But we also, like we did during the pandemic, are investing more of our marketing resources into the drive market right here in the region and Southern California, and people for whom it's an easy trip to come here. And we want to convert a day tripper to an overnight guest. We want a Southern California guest to come for 3 nights instead of 2. And little by little, that's how we're going to expand and maintain and hopefully still grow here in Napa
Well, now
Valley.
that the Lakers are eliminated and the Warriors are in, maybe our SoCal friends can come watch the
They
Warriors.
have a lot of free time
They do.
down there.
But-
Sports tourism is legit. That's a real driver.
And we have
Yeah.
several high profile sports and entertainment figures that have invested in brands and creating brands here in the Napa Valley as well. So
Do you
that's
blame them?
natural.
I
We've got
agree.
Super Bowl and World Cup coming, and so we will
World
benefit.
Cup,
from it.
I'm all about soccer, but one of the things that I think we haven't hit on, and I know we're kind of winding down on the time, but this social responsibility. And I've seen your industry agree to the, I think it's the 1% for affordable housing.
That's right.
And you've invested in some pilot programs around transportation, but what does that look like for you? And sometimes it's government imposing it. Sometimes it's you all leading on that. So give us a little kind of perspective on what does social responsibility mean to your industry right now?
Look, we refer to it as destination stewardship. And that came through as a very high priority from our stakeholders when we did our long range plan a couple of years ago. They want us to continue to welcome people into the destination and provide a great experience, but they also want the hospitality industry to be thinking about being stewards of the destination the way that our winery and vineyard colleagues here in the Valley have done for so long. We have the first ag preserve in the nation. We have great programs like Napa Green that certify wineries and vineyards and really, programs at the highest level. So we are being encouraged and bringing through lots of programs that are going to make us good stewards of our destination. A lot of our properties are already doing these things, but it's about providing an umbrella for that and to just push the envelope for everybody, encourage everybody to do whatever we can to be conserving the destination so that we may continue to share it with others for generations to come. So it's a very high priority for the industry. You're going to see some third-party certification and consumer-facing programs that are in pilot phase right now coming to life. But we are very much focused on it and want to be leaders in this space and hospitality here in Napa Valley.
I'm really excited not only for your leadership in this destination travel space and just in hospitality in the Napa Valley in general and statewide, globally, but we're really coming into kind of the prime of what we have to offer here in the Napa Valley with, entertainment, music festivals. We've got all the things that anybody would want to have to experience outside because our climate is so fantastic year round. And you can still pick and choose what experiences you want to have for your own lifestyle. And so I'm excited for our opportunities. There are challenges for sure that are out there. glad people like you are addressing those and working with your colleagues to make that happen. But I'm getting ready to toast to our success of the Napa Valley. It doesn't come without a lot of work. I'm glad that you're willing to put that work in. But any last thoughts that you might have?
Well, I think we can keep talking for a long time here because, I think Linsey has so much to talk about, right? Because this industry, I think our successes are so intertwined, and I mentioned that. But I think, Linsey, I just want to give you, some credit because you've done a phenomenal job. And Clay Gregory, did an incredible job, and we should toast to him, right? Because he built something, he took some criticism for it, but it was vision. And I think you're a continuation of that vision for this valley. And I know the pressure is real because I've seen it, but so much of Napa's success is dependent on your industry being successful, right? So, there's the nice imagery, there's the nice numbers, but you're just a person too, right? You're a mom, right? You're responsible for a lot. And maybe you can just end with some words of what it's like to be a leader in Napa Valley in this moment right now, right? It's not easy, but there's so many people that while you might hear some criticism, there's so many people in your corner, right? That are silently believing and quite honestly, depending on Visit Napa Valley to be successful. And I think I shared the story a while ago that, a family in sports was looking for sponsorship and they said no, because they took pride in having jobs and they were employed by your industry. And to me, that was the power of what you do. Beyond the $2 billion, it's the empowerment of people. Right? And that's what your industry does. So maybe the final words to Linsey to just say, what is it like to do this every day?
Well, it is a true privilege, and I feel the weight of that every day. I love living here. To your point, Alfredo, I see you in all sorts of
School
crossover
drop-off.
touch points. We were in school drop off, me running with a suit and heels, trying to get kids in their latest project, into the school.
But that's what you do.
I pick up at extended care, I drop off at soccer and baseball, and then I go back to the office and, all those things. But it's, I'm so proud to get to do the work that I do on behalf of this community and of this industry. We've chosen to raise a family here, and I've got a 5th grader and a 7th grader who are going to be here at least through high school. And yet, I think that we have to focus on what is the magic of this community. It's an agricultural, hardworking, farming community. This is an agricultural product, and we're the envy of the world. And we get to partner with great organizations like the Napa Valley Vintners and the Farm Bureau and the grape growers and the wine growers groups. And we're all here to advocate on behalf of the farmers and the industry. And I get to be out in the world so often, singing the virtues of Napa Valley. But at the end of the day, it's $7 million a day that comes into this community from tourism and hospitality. And we're just happy to be here and be a part of Napa Valley.
I just wanted to humanize it, John, because I think a lot gets lost in what we do. And we can relate being elected officials, we're part of the criticism, but you have so many leaders that are leading these organizations that contribute to the magic of Napa. And you're one of those pillars. So I just want to say
I think we can
Thank
toast
you.
to that.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed having Linsey as our guest. What did you think?
Look, Linsey did a phenomenal job, right? And she's been under attack lately, unfairly, in my opinion. But here we are, right? You have this incredible community, and people are complaining about what we have, John. And I'm tired of it. It's Napa Valley. It's the envy of what regions want to become, and it's happening in our backyard. And I think it's easy for people to complain about Napa when it's so special. There's Chef's Market that's coming online. There's mariachi on Thursday, right? There's theater at Lucky Penny. There's things happening, and yet people are more willing to complain versus accept how privileged. And I'm not saying privilege just for the few. It's privilege for the many. And I think it's time to start choosing to celebrate who we are versus complaining of what we are.
I agree. And I really think that most people appreciate how special the Napa Valley is. And it's worth fighting for, absolutely. And so people like Linsey have committed to making sure that we keep the Napa Valley a special place to live and work.
And I agree with you, right? It's not about fighting for, it's acknowledging that Napa's for everyone. And it's here, right? So stop pretending, stop trying to color it or narrative frame it as a different way, it's for all of us. And the fact that we're doing this podcast as farm workers are going to a farm worker location next door, I think it's freaking awesome because
Perfect.
That's what Napa's about, man.
That's right. Cheers.
Cheers.